Hi, my name's Arden, and last week my parents told me, "Don't you dare show your face at your brother's wedding." They screamed that I'd disgrace the family, said I should stay home and watch the dogs. What they didn't know was that the luxury hotel where they planned their perfect wedding? It was mine. My name's been on the deed for 7 years. They stole from me, lied about me, erased me from the family story, and still expected me to smile from the shadows like I didn't matter. But this time, I didn't disappear. And what happened next? Let's just say they weren't the only ones who knew how to write a story. Want to hear how it all unraveled? The office had gone quiet for the evening. Most people had already left, leaving only the faint hum of the air unit and the soft tapping of my fingers against the desk as I finished a few emails. It was supposed to be an ordinary end to a long day, but my phone lit up with my parents' number, and the shift in my stomach told me it wouldn't be anything close to ordinary. I answered. My father didn't bother with a greeting. His voice hit me like a shove. "Don't you dare show up at your brother's wedding." No pause, no explanation, just raw command. Before I could process it, my mother's voice cut in, sharp and rehearsed. "If you go, you'll disgrace this entire family. Stay home. Watch the dogs. That's all you need to do." I held the phone to my ear, letting their words settle. They spoke as if they'd practiced the speech, as if removing me from that day was a task on a checklist. I didn't argue. I've learned that arguing only gives them more room to twist the knife. So I listened until the line went dead, and for a moment I just sat there, stunned at how ordinary they sounded while saying something so final. I lowered the phone, breathing slowly. Their tone wasn't new. They'd talked down to me for years, slipping orders into every conversation. But something about this call felt different. It wasn't anger. It was the clarity that hit me, the sudden sense that a line had been crossed without hesitation. I opened the wedding group chat on my phone. I don't know why, maybe to see if anything explained their outburst. Instead, a message popped up. "You are no longer a participant in this conversation." Removed. Not muted. Not archived. Removed. The list of old messages still sat there. Months of planning. Photos from venue visits. Jokes that never included me. I remembered offering help months ago and being brushed aside with the kind of politeness that tells you not to try again. I scrolled until the screen blurred. It wasn't just rejection. It was erasure, tidy and efficient. A familiar tug from years earlier slipped in. Growing up, I'd been the youngest, the fixer, the quiet buffer between arguments, the kid who cleaned up after everyone's mistakes and got no acknowledgement for it. I didn't choose that role. It was assigned the moment I could hold a flashlight while my father worked on an engine or smoothed things over after my brother snapped at a neighbor. No one asked what I wanted. They asked what I could cover. Those memories weren't dramatic. They were just steady reminders of where they believed I belonged, beneath the noise, not part of it. My email chimed. A forwarded hotel message from the automated system appeared at the top of my inbox. I clicked it, assuming it was a routine update. A seating chart attachment opened. My name sat near the bottom of the page, only it wasn't exactly my name. The spelling was wrong, and it wasn't placed with family. It was dropped at a table labeled service staff, tucked beside the kitchen door. At first, I thought it had to be an error. Maybe the system glitched. Maybe someone selected the wrong category. But the more I looked, the more I noticed consistency. Every place where my name should have been was replaced with this same version, tucked where guests barely looked. Someone had filled in those details intentionally. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long breath. It didn't come from anger. It came from something smaller and tighter, like the sting you feel when a truth finally stops hiding. I set the printed name card aside, though it felt heavier than its weight. For a moment, I considered calling my parents back. I pictured the conversation, my father talking over me, my mother sighing as though I'd created the inconvenience. I knew exactly how it would play out, so I didn't dial. Silence felt safer. It always had. I turned to my computer instead and opened my banking portal. The pending transfer sat there, $590,000 scheduled to be sent for wedding costs I'd quietly agreed to cover when they first asked, back when they still pretended I was part of the family. I didn't touch the transfer. I just stared at it, feeling the tension rise in a way I couldn't yet name. It wasn't about the money. It was about the pattern. How easily they took. How easily I let them. Night settled outside my window. The headlights from cars along the freeway created slow-moving streaks of white across the glass. I finally set my phone down and looked at the wrong name card sitting on my desk. The ink looked cheap, but the message behind it was unmistakable. "They really don't want me there," I said quietly, not to convince myself, but because saying it out loud gave the thought a shape I could finally see. The room stayed still while something inside me shifted, not loudly but definitively, like a door closing in a distant hallway. I stared at that cheap, wrong name card and wondered how long I had let them decide my place in their world. For the first time in my life, I asked myself a different question. What if I stopped letting them? I barely slept that night. My eyes were closed, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying every word from that call. It didn't feel like an outburst. It felt rehearsed, coordinated, like I'd been written out of their lives and didn't even get a courtesy copy of the script. When the sky turned pale and bled orange over the rooftops, I gave up trying to sleep. The house was quiet. No sounds except the click of my mug against the counter and the soft gurgle of the coffee maker. I stood by the window, blinds half open, watching the early sun bounce off the hood of my truck parked in the driveway. Just another morning in Houston for everyone else, but not for me. I sat down at the kitchen table with my coffee, hands still cold despite the heat. My laptop was already open from last night. The screen lit up. The banking tab was still there, waiting. I moved the cursor slowly over the pending transfer. $590,000. I had scheduled it without fanfare weeks ago. No one had asked me to. They just assumed. That's what always got me. It was never requests, just expectations. I was the fallback, the quiet wallet. The line from the call echoed again. "You'll disgrace this entire family." That stung, not because it was new, but because I used to believe they didn't mean it. I clicked the cancel transfer button. A window popped up confirming, "Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled payment?" I hovered. I thought of my mother's condescending tone, my father's bark, Kellen's silence through all of it. I thought about how, growing up, I paid for things with my allowance that Kellen broke and never apologized for. I thought of the family vacations I planned, only to be treated like a driver. I thought of the fake smile my dad wore when I signed my first property and how quickly he changed the subject. Then I clicked. The screen blinked. Transfer successfully canceled. Just like that, the funds returned to my account. No confetti, no music, but something shifted. Not adrenaline, not revenge, just stillness. Like I'd taken my first clean breath in years. "Let them handle it," I said aloud. My voice sounded strange, unused. I liked how calm it was. I leaned back and stared at the wall until the silence was interrupted by a call from an unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but this time, curiosity made me answer. "Hi, Mr. Lane," a young woman's voice said. "This is Marissa from the Fairwinds Hotel. I just wanted to apologize. I believe I accidentally forwarded you the vendor seating list yesterday instead of the general update. I'm so sorry if that caused any confusion." I nodded, even though she couldn't see. "It did," I said plainly. She hesitated, her tone shifting from professional to nervous. "I assumed you knew, but when I spoke to your brother's fiancé, she asked that we label you as a non-family guest. She said it would avoid awkward photos." I stopped breathing for a moment. Awkward photos. It was one thing to be excluded. It was another to be deliberately labeled like a stranger at your own brother's wedding. "I thought you were a sponsor, or... Anyway, I'm so sorry," she added quickly, realizing she'd said too much. "It's okay," I said, though it wasn't. "Thank you for letting me know." I ended the call and stared at the phone. So it wasn't just my parents. It wasn't just Kellen. His fiancée, whom I'd helped find a job last year, by the way, had gone out of her way to remove me from family photos. Not one accident, not miscommunication. Erasure. A clean, surgical cut. I walked outside. The sun was higher now, warming the concrete. My yard was neat, trimmed. A small space, but mine. I stood there, listening to the breeze rustle the neighbors' trees. And for some reason, I thought about the first time I got grounded for something Kellen did. He'd broken my dad's watch and hidden the pieces in my backpack. I didn't rat him out. I just took the punishment. At the time, I thought that's what brothers did. But now I realized that moment wasn't an exception. It was the rule. I walked back inside, pulled up my emails, and started scrolling. I don't even know why at first. Maybe to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. I opened the contract for the wedding venue. My name wasn't anywhere obvious, but then I noticed something. On the ownership footer, my company's name, my name. A signature from 2 years ago when I'd quietly acquired several distressed properties during the pandemic market crash. Fairwinds Hotel was one of them. I blinked at the screen, scrolling through the asset list. There it was, 51% ownership stake. I had completely forgotten. It had been folded into a bundle of purchases and barely needed attention since. The hotel was well managed and profitable. "They're throwing a wedding in a place I partially own," I whispered. It wasn't ego. It was realization. And they had no idea. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, staring at the screen. The same laptop where I'd just canceled their wedding funds. The same email where I saw I'd been reclassified as a vendor. The same place where I now stared at my signature on the building they were using to stage my exclusion. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a gift. I closed the laptop slowly, not with anger, but with awareness. Awareness of just how much I'd been used and how much I'd allowed it. Until now. A part of me wanted to warn them, but another part finally asked, why save people who enjoy watching you drown? That question stayed with me the next morning as I drove to the hotel, ready to confirm exactly how much power I actually had. The roads were still mostly empty, Houston waking up in patches as I passed coffee shops unlocking their doors and joggers cutting through crosswalks with earbuds in. I kept the radio off. My thoughts were loud enough. Pulling into the private garage beneath the Fairwinds Hotel, I parked in one of the executive spaces. No valet, no fanfare. Just me and the quiet click of my shoes on polished concrete. Inside, the lobby looked like something out of an architecture magazine. Cool marble floors, glass sculptures, fresh flowers in tall vases. The kind of space where people lowered their voices and pretended they weren't looking at each other's watches. The jazz in the background was subtle, curated. I had walked these halls years ago when this place was just a risky investment. Back then, I was younger, still proving something. Now it felt like stepping into a palace I helped build but had never truly claimed. The front desk associate glanced up, but before he could speak, Alondra Hayes stepped out from the back hallway. She was already halfway into a blazer, her sharp presence unmistakable even at 8 a.m. "Mr. Lane," she said, walking toward me. "It's good to see you." I returned her handshake. "Thank you for making time." "Of course," she said, then lowered her voice just slightly. "Let's talk in my office." The walk there was short, but the weight of what I'd come to discuss made it feel longer. We passed floral arrangements being wheeled in for some corporate brunch, and a few staff nodded discreetly in recognition. Alondra kept her pace steady, professional, but her eyes flicked to me as we turned into the office suite. Once the door shut behind us, she gestured to the seat across from hers. "I had a feeling you'd show up." I nodded. "I just need clarity about everything." She didn't ask what I meant. She opened her laptop, clicked through a few folders, and said, "I reviewed the event file after our coordinator brought the issue to me. I'm deeply sorry for how this was handled, Arden." Her use of my first name told me this wasn't just a business formality. She meant it. I leaned forward. "My family booked the venue under the assumption I was covering everything. Then they cut me out of the guest list, removed me from the group chat, told me not to show up." She blinked slowly, clearly weighing her response. "I see. And I canceled the wire, the $590,000. I let that sit. Alondra's expression didn't change much, but her fingers moved faster over the keyboard. She pulled up the digital contract. "That amount matches the total due for full buyout, including rooftop terrace, premium bar package, and late checkout blocks." She scrolled down. "And here, this clause. Final payment required 10 days prior to the event. Non-payment results in automatic cancellation." I looked at the date beside it. Due, October 5th. Today, October 7th. "They missed the deadline," I said flatly. Alondra turned the screen slightly toward me. "They assumed the payment had gone through. No one followed up. So technically, the wedding is off." "Technically, yes. It was never finalized. They didn't read the fine print. You did." She paused, then added, "Would you like me to send them a final notice?" I shook my head. "No, let's follow the contract." She nodded once, understanding everything in that brief pause. As she prepared the paperwork, she hesitated, hand still on the mouse. "Before you go, there's something else." She opened a separate folder, email correspondence. "I don't normally show this, but I think you deserve to see it." It was a thread going back 2 months. The sender, Natalie, my brother's fiancée. The subject, seating clarification for Arden Lane. Her words were coded in corporate politeness, but the meaning was ice cold. "Please ensure Mr. Lane is seated away from family during all events to avoid unnecessary tension. He can be included in vendor seating or general staff zones if needed. He is not to appear in formal photographs. Event by event, brunch, rehearsal dinner, ceremony, reception." Each note reinforced the message. I was not family. I was a logistical problem. I stared at the screen. Alondra stayed silent. Eventually, I said, "They called me a disruption." She closed the thread gently. You didn't deserve that. I didn't argue. I just sat back, letting the truth settle. They hadn't just tried to keep me out of one dinner. They tried to erase me from the whole weekend. Quietly, systematically. I stood up. Thank you for showing me. She handed me printed copies of the contract and the email chain. If you need anything else, you know where to find me. Outside her office, I paused in the hallway, gripping the folder. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't even angry in the way I used to be. Something inside me had realigned. I wasn't looking for a fight anymore. I was looking for closure. They had built this wedding, this image, this performance on my back. My money, my silence, my name on the deeds. And they still decided I was unworthy of being seen. I walked toward the terrace. Staff were setting up for another event, a retirement party from the looks of it. Balloons, caterers, neatly pressed linens. I leaned against the railing, watching the city stretch out below. Sunlight bounced off the glass towers. A train rumbled faintly somewhere in the distance. They have no idea, I murmured. Not about the contract. Not about the ownership. Not about what happens next. But I did. You built all of this on my back, and you still pushed me out. It hurt, but it freed me too. So I drove home and opened a folder I hadn't touched in years, the one holding every investment paper my family never bothered to ask about. It was buried on the top shelf of my bedroom closet, behind a stack of old tax binders and a barely used suitcase. I carried it downstairs like something fragile, though there was nothing delicate about it. Just paper, ink, and years of silence. I cleared a space at the dining table, sunlight warming the wood through half-tilted blinds, and laid it out. The gray folder was thicker than I remembered, a quiet, personal archive of everything I'd built after they stopped asking if I was okay. There were renovation invoices from crumbling hotels I'd helped turn around, legal agreements from the years I partnered with small-time developers who became desperate during the post-pandemic collapse, funding logs, loan agreements, stakeholder memos, none of them glamorous, none of them fast, but all of it real. They never asked how I kept going after Kellen got the big job in DC, or after my mother's quiet surgery no one told me about until it was done. They never asked how I stayed afloat when deals fell through, or if I had anyone to call when I was sitting in the ER with chest pains and no one to drive me home. They just assumed I'd be fine. And eventually, I was. Not because of them, but in spite of them. Flipping deeper into the folder, something fell out. A smaller notebook, spiral-bound, the corners curled from age. My old handwriting stared back at me. I froze. It was a ledger, not of investments, but of every dime I spent for them. The first entry was from my early 20s. January, Kellen's transmission repair, 1,375. Then, March, Mom's dental surgery, uninsured portion, $940. August, Dad's business tax penalty, $2,300. October, refinance fee on family home, $9,800, paid directly. Page after page. Birthdays I paid for, emergencies I was called in to fix, tuition shortfalls, last-minute loans that were just until next month. Always me, always quiet, always the fix, and not one thank you. Just expectations. My throat tightened. I ran my fingers over the ink, remembering how I wrote most of these entries late at night, not to keep score, but to remind myself that it happened, that I wasn't imagining the weight I carried. Looking at it now, I realized something deeper, something uglier. They didn't just lean on me. They believed it was my role. And now, when I dared to pause, to step back, they didn't just ignore me. They punished me for it. I set the ledger next to the hotel contract. Side by side, they told the whole story. All the giving, all the erasing. My phone buzzed on the table. A new voicemail notification. Not recent. A system update had resurfaced an old one from weeks ago. I tapped the play button without thinking. "Hey man," Kellen's voice, light, casual. "Thanks again for covering the deposit. We'll pay you back eventually. You know, once life settles down. Mom says you shouldn't make a big deal out of it. You know how you get. You know how you get." I paused the message. That phrase wasn't just a jab. It was a mask. A way to dismiss every boundary I ever tried to draw. Every protest, every no. Every moment I ever wanted to be heard, reduced to a personality flaw. You know how you get. Frustrated, sensitive, difficult. I hit play again, just to hear the tone. It wasn't malicious. That was almost worse. It was indifferent. I placed the phone face down on the table and sat back. There was a version of me, old, automatic, who would have picked up the phone right then, called my mother, warned them, told them they were days late on a contract that would void everything, saved the wedding, saved their face, but I didn't move. Because that version of me was done. I didn't owe them a rescue. I didn't owe them an explanation. And most of all, I didn't owe them the comfort of pretending this didn't hurt. As late afternoon light stretched across the kitchen tile, I gathered every paper back into the folder. My hands didn't shake. The facts were mine. The proof was mine. The story, all the pieces, was mine. They had never seen it, never asked for it, and now they wouldn't get a chance to rewrite it. I stood up and walked to the shelf, slid the folder back into place. It didn't feel like hiding anymore. It felt like preservation. The blinds filtered warm amber light into the room. Outside, a neighbor's wind chimes stirred faintly in the breeze. I stared at the quiet space around me. No shouting, no guilt, no performance, just air and room. "This time," I whispered, "you'll deal with the mess you created." The next day, I received a wedding itinerary I was never supposed to see, and it told me everything I needed to know about my place in their picture-perfect world. I was standing in the kitchen, still in the same t-shirt from the night before, sipping black coffee that had gone cold before the first sip when the email pinged. It looked like a standard update from the hotel's automated planning system, so I opened it out of habit more than curiosity. Then I saw the subject line, "Final Wedding Itinerary, Family Review Copy." For a second, I wondered if they'd mistakenly added me back, or maybe someone had come to their senses. That hope lasted maybe 3 seconds. Page 1. Welcome guests. Floral graphics. Smiling couple photos. A message from Kellen and his fiancée, thanking family and friends for being part of our journey. No mention of siblings. Page 2. The weekend overview. Rehearsal dinner, cocktail hour, bridal brunch, morning yoga, afternoon spa time. My name didn't appear. Not once, not under family portraits, not under seating arrangements, not even in the general guest list. It was like scrolling through a story I never existed in. I sat down at the table and kept reading, my thumb moving on its own. Kellen had his own bolded section. A toast to the groom. His accolades, achievements, funny stories. My parents were named in a glowing paragraph. Generous mentors, emotional anchors, pillars of love. Even our second cousins from California made the program. Their names, their contributions, their reserved spots at events I apparently wouldn't be allowed into. I reached the last page, blank, but for one sentence. A curated experience for those closest to our hearts. My chest tightened, not from surprise, but from recognition. This wasn't new. This wasn't accidental. This was planned. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd removed me, deliberately, cleanly, with full intent. I set the phone down, face up, like it was contaminated. The air around me didn't move. The hum of the fridge was the only sound. I closed my eyes and, uninvited, an old memory crept in. Me at 16, holding the family camera during portraits. "We need someone behind the lens," Mom had said. I remember Dad adding, "You're good with that stuff anyway." No one thought to include me in a photo. Just like now, they always had a role for me. Support staff, backup, invisible scaffolding. Now that same old story had grown up and put on a suit. It had become wedding programs and seating charts and floral-themed lies. Later that day, I left the house. I needed to breathe somewhere that didn't smell like old ink and dust. I found myself at a small cafe a few blocks down, one of those places with the soft jazz playing too loud and mismatched mugs that looked stolen from 10 different kitchens. I ordered a tea I didn't want and stood by the pickup counter, watching the barista pour milk into someone else's latte. That's when I heard it. Behind me, unmistakable, Loretta. My mother's closest friend since I was 10. Loud, oblivious, still talking like she was on a landline in 1998. She was on the phone. I wasn't trying to listen, but I didn't have to try. "Oh, honey, you know they never count Arden as part of the real family events. He's just Arden." Just Arden. A pause, a laugh. Besides, Kellen's bride wants a clean aesthetic. She said Arden would throw off the balance in photos, whatever that means. I didn't move. My tea was ready. I didn't take it. The words sat there, sour in the air, not whispered, not careful, like it was common knowledge. Something so unimportant, it didn't require secrecy. I walked out without turning around, hands clenched, mouth dry. The Houston heat slapped against my face, and I welcomed it. At least it was honest. Standing on the sidewalk, I didn't feel angry at Loretta. I felt angry that she felt safe saying those things because my family had taught her it was okay. I thought about the ledger, the canceled wire transfer, the contract clause, the name card, the voicemail. Now this. Every moment I'd kept quiet, told myself to let it go. Let them be, let them win. I had taught them I was disposable. Silence wasn't peacekeeping. It was permission. They built a world where I didn't exist, because I never made them face the version of me that did. I walked back to my car with no music playing in my head, no internal monologue spinning dramatic thoughts. Just resolve. I sat in the driver's seat, engine off, hands still. The air inside the car was stifling, and I didn't roll down the window. "If they want a world without me in it," I whispered, "I can show them exactly what that looks like." I sat in the parked car long after whispering those words, letting the quiet settle around me. The sky above Houston looked washed out, pale in a way that matched the hollow feeling sitting in my chest. I eventually drove home, fixed a small dinner I barely touched, and tried to distract myself with paperwork at the dining table. Nothing stuck. My thoughts kept circling the same dark truth. They didn't just push me out. They'd drawn a whole world without me in it. It happened that evening, when I got a call from someone I never expected, carrying news that knocked the wind out of me. My phone lit up with Russell's name. He wasn't someone who called casually. He was steady, calm, the kind of advisor who never raised his voice even when the market dipped. Tonight, though, he sounded almost guarded. "Arden, we need to talk," he said. "Your parents tried pulling a large sum from the emergency account you set up years back. They submitted paperwork claiming you'd approved it. I didn't answer right away. The room felt too still, like even the shadows were waiting for my response. Russell continued, choosing his words. The signatures looked altered. We flagged it. I leaned back in my chair, gripping the armrest to keep my hands steady. How much? Close to 200,000. He paused. Timed right before the wedding festivities. Of course it was. A move disguised as necessity. A safety net they didn't want to pay for themselves. They'd gotten money from me so many times with half-truths and emergencies that didn't exist. But forging my approval, that was new. I swallowed once, then said, "Freeze everything tied to my name." Russell didn't ask why. "It'll be done tonight." When the call ended, the silence felt deeper. I turned off the kitchen light and walked into the living room. I didn't turn on another. I just let the dark settle around me, my eyes adjusting slowly. There was a heaviness in my chest I couldn't shake. Something quieter and more painful than anger. Grief. Grief for the version of myself that kept giving them the benefit of the doubt. I lowered my head and whispered, "What am I even trying to save anymore?" I didn't get an answer from the empty room. Instead, my phone buzzed again. A text from Aunt Valerie popped up, the kind of message that starts with concern but reeks of gossip. "Sweetheart, your parents told everyone you're acting jealous. They're worried you'll cause a scene at the wedding. Just stay calm, okay?" I scrolled. More messages came in one after another. "We're praying for you. Hope you sort yourself out. Your mom said you're overwhelmed again. Don't come to the rehearsal dinner if you're upset. Overwhelmed again. Acting jealous. Sort yourself out." They weren't just pushing me aside, they were framing me, turning me into the problem before anyone asked questions. A preemptive defense. A strategy. My parents had always worried more about how things looked than how things were. They built narratives the same way other families planned vacations. And now I was being written as unstable, unpredictable, an embarrassing wild card. I set the phone down, face to the table. My breathing was shallow. Each inhale caught halfway up my throat. I stood and walked out onto the balcony, needing air. The night was thick, humid, the kind that clung to your clothes and made every exhale feel heavier. The skyline usually grounded me, but tonight it flickered like a warning. I rested both hands on the railing and let the weight of the day press into my shoulders. The forged documents, the money grab, the lies spreading through the family, the way they rewrote reality with such confidence. A thought formed quietly, dangerously. This is how they get rid of people. They don't cut you out with one blow. They drown you under stories about yourself until no one remembers you differently. For a split second, I imagined disappearing, turning off my phone, driving until the state line, letting them host their perfect wedding without the inconvenience of my presence. It sounded peaceful in a way that scared me. But then another thought surfaced, unexpected, stubborn. Last month, Evan from my office had pulled me aside, upset about something his family had said. I remembered telling him, "Don't ever let people decide your worth for you." I'd meant every word. I just hadn't lived any of them. The realization steadied me. I straightened, rubbing my palms over my face, pushing the despair back far enough so I could breathe again. Yes, I was exhausted. Yes, the hurt ran deeper than I wanted to admit. But erased? No, not anymore. I stepped back inside, closing the balcony door with a calm that felt foreign but welcome. The apartment remained dark, but it no longer felt like a place swallowing me whole. "If they want a story," I murmured. I'll give them the truth instead. But before I could act, life threw me one more blow, one that nearly made me walk away from everything. It didn't come with yelling, or slam doors, or any moment loud enough to call a turning point. No. It came quietly, in the most casual betrayal of all, a message from someone I thought never would. It started with a text from Kellen. Not a call, not a conversation. Just a short, cold string of words lit up on my screen as I sipped my second coffee, trying to keep my mind off the chaos. Mom and Dad told me you're struggling again. Please don't make this week harder for anyone. If you stay quiet and avoid showing up, things will settle down. I stared at it for a long time. Kellen didn't write like that. It wasn't just the tone, it was the precision. Every word felt carefully arranged, like someone else had crafted it. There was no warmth, no hesitation, not even the usual bro tossed in at the end. Just polished distance. I read it again, slower. Someone else was speaking through him, or for him. Either way, it wasn't the brother I used to know. By the afternoon, I got another ping, this time from Miriam. I hadn't heard from her directly in months. She and I always kept things respectful, polite. But this was different. She sent a screenshot, a group chat, between her, Kellen, my parents, and Kellen's best man. The kind of chat you start to organize family details for a wedding. Only the details weren't flowers or timelines. They were about me. Make sure he thinks it's his fault. He'll stay away if he believes he's the problem. We can't let him show up and make the family look divided. Once the wedding's over, he won't matter. I stopped breathing for a moment. They weren't just hoping I'd stay out of the way. They were orchestrating it. They had a strategy. Kellen had a strategy. And worse, he was comfortable enough to plan my removal like a checklist item, as if I were a spilled drink they needed to mop up before the guests arrived. A few minutes later, Miriam called. Her voice was quiet, almost shaky. I didn't mean to find that, Arden. I scrolled back too far while looking for something else. I felt sick reading it. I didn't respond. I thought Kellen respected you. I really did, she added. I don't understand why your family needs to make you the villain, but it's intentional, calculated. Then she paused. They told me you might try to claim credit for the hotel venue. I didn't even know it was yours. My jaw tightened. They're planning for the truth to leak. Yeah, she whispered, and they're making sure no one believes it when it does. After the call, I didn't move. I just sat there, phone still warm in my hand, replaying every conversation, every favor, every quiet act of loyalty I'd ever given Kellen, every ride, every bailout, every late-night call I picked up. It meant nothing to them. Worse, it was fuel for a story where I was nothing more than bitter and unstable. And they weren't done. That evening, Aunt Valerie messaged again. A link, private family Facebook post. My mother's name at the top. Please pray for our youngest son. He struggles with resentment and has caused difficulties for the family these past years. We hope he finds peace and stays away from stressful events like the wedding. I didn't react right away. Not to the words, not to the post, but the comments. He's always been difficult. I remember he refused to help when the family needed him. Some people just never grow up. Each one felt like a brick hitting my chest, not because they didn't know the truth, but because they never cared to ask. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a rewrite, a clean slate, with me erased. I sat on the couch, hands gripping my knees, pulse pounding in my ears. The apartment was quiet, but not like before. This silence didn't feel like drowning. It felt like preparation. I had begged for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. I had explained myself to people who only needed silence to believe they were right. I had fought for belonging in a family that had already redrawn the borders without my name. And for the first time, I understood. Silence wasn't peacekeeping. It was permission. And I wasn't giving it anymore. I heard my father's voice in my memory, calm, firm, always calculated. Don't you dare show your face at your brother's wedding. He meant it as a threat. But now, it felt like permission. I didn't yell, didn't throw my phone across the room or cry into my fists. I stood. I walked to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water and drank it in silence. Then I opened my laptop. I pulled up folders, old emails, bank transfers, renovation permits, the deed to the hotel, copies of checks, screenshots of thank you messages they probably thought I deleted. I wasn't gathering ammo for revenge. I was gathering memory, proof, truth. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew I wouldn't be gaslit out of my own life. I closed the laptop and sat back, feeling something I hadn't in a long time. Stillness, the good kind. The kind that comes when the noise finally stops and the truth stands alone in the middle of the room, not needing to be screamed to be heard. I looked out the window and said to no one, "If they want the truth, I'll let them see it in daylight." And the next morning, before I could decide my next step, they struck again. This time in a way that nearly destroyed everything I'd built. It came in a single envelope, slipped under my door just after sunrise. I was pouring coffee, trying to steady my thoughts after a long, sleepless night, when I noticed it, white, unmarked, sitting quietly on the mat like it had always belonged there. No return address, no name, only my apartment number written in uneven strokes, like whoever wrote it couldn't decide whether they were shaking from anger or guilt. I picked it up slowly, heart tight with a kind of dread I hadn't felt in years. The paper inside was stiff, too clean, legal formatting. Stapled on top in bold black ink was a single sentence: "Sign this and stay away." I pulled out the sheet beneath the note and unfolded it carefully. At first, I thought it was a prank, but the deeper I read, the clearer it became. This was no joke. It was a contract, 4 pages long, typed, precise, demanding I admit to causing emotional distress to the family, agreeing to refrain from attending all future family events, waiving any claim to family assets, support, or inheritance, and the final insult. Acknowledge that the hotel used for the upcoming wedding is property of the family, not of the undersigned. I stared at that last line for a long time. It wasn't just a lie. It was an erasure, on paper, in ink. They weren't trying to silence me anymore. They were trying to steal what I'd built with my own hands and bury me beneath a false story. And they were doing it legally. At the bottom were 3 signatures: my father, my mother, and Kellen. No hesitation, no blank spaces, just ink and certainty. It hit me then, not like a punch, but like a slow, rising tide that had been inching closer for years. I had spent my adult life patching holes in their lives, quietly, steadily. I showed up when no one else would. I sent money when bills were late. I stayed silent when insults were dressed as advice. All of that, for what? To become a threat they needed to legally exile. The document slid from my hand and landed softly on the table. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling like it might offer some answer, but all I got was quiet, until the knock. A sharp, precise knock, 3 times. I opened the door slowly, already on edge. A man in a dark gray suit stood there, clipboard in hand, courier badge on his jacket. "Are you Arden?" he asked, already knowing the answer. I nodded once. He handed me another envelope. This one stamped, official. "I was instructed to deliver this today, from your family. I'm just the messenger." Of course he was. I took the envelope, closed the door without another word, and walked back to the table. My hands didn't shake as I opened it, but my chest did tighten, like something inside was bracing itself. It was a letter from my father. Short, surgical. "If you love this family, you will sign the agreement. Your presence has always been a disruption. Do the right thing and let us celebrate without fear of your behavior. Do not show up." I read it once, then again, then one more time, slower. And then I laughed, not out of humor. It was the kind of laugh that breaks free when you've run out of sadness, fear, and logic all at once. A hollow sound, echoing off the kitchen walls like someone else had made it. He wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of the truth I carried. I stood there for a long moment, both envelopes open in front of me. I didn't feel rage, not anymore. What I felt was clean, focused, enough. I picked up a pen, not to sign, but to write. I grabbed an empty envelope from my desk drawer, pulled a sticky note from the side, and wrote a single line. "You do not own me, not anymore." I slipped it inside, sealed it, and set it on the same spot where their agreement had landed. That note wasn't for them. It was for me. A small act of clarity. The first in a long line of decisions I would make, not in response to their games, but for my own peace. That evening, as the city began to light up outside, I opened my laptop again. Not for documents this time, but for action. I booked a suite at the hotel. My hotel. A corner room overlooking the main ballroom where the wedding would be held. I used my business account. I confirmed the reservation in my full name. I made no effort to hide. I didn't plan to make a scene. Didn't plan to crash their fairy tale. I just planned to be present, not to demand attention, but to reclaim space. By the time I closed my laptop, the room had grown dim, the early evening casting soft shadows across the floor. I didn't turn on a light. I didn't need it. The darkness wasn't suffocating anymore. I stood by the window, hands in my pockets, watching the lights flicker on across the skyline. My reflection stared back, steady and grounded in a way I hadn't seen in years. "They wanted me gone," I whispered, almost surprised by the calm in my own voice. "So I'll make sure they're finally seen." And the next morning, the truth didn't just surface. It exploded in front of everyone, leaving no room to hide. It began with a single mistake on their part. One they didn't catch until the damage was irreversible. I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed across the counter. It was Claudia, the general manager of the hotel. Sharp, no nonsense. A woman who ran the place like a ship that never once tilted. Her voice on the line was tight with concern. "Arden," she said, "your family's downstairs. They're trying to access the ballroom for setup, but they've presented documents saying the hotel belongs to them." I stayed silent for a beat. She added, "We checked everything. What they're holding doesn't match any ownership records. I didn't want to escalate without talking to you first." That was it. Their mistake. They brought forged papers to my hotel and tried to pass them off as legitimate. I dressed in silence, slid the phone into my pocket, and headed to the elevator. The short ride down felt longer than any flight I'd ever taken, not because I was afraid, but because I was done running. The lobby was buzzing with low voices and raised eyebrows. My parents stood near the check-in desk, flanked by Kellen and 3 relatives from out of town. Tension crackled in the air like static before a storm. One of the wedding decorators was frozen mid-step, holding a bouquet like she didn't know whether to set it down or run. Claudia spotted me first and moved toward me with professional precision. Her voice was just loud enough for the others to hear. "Mr. Marston," she said calmly, "could you help clarify something? Your family claims ownership of this property." All eyes turned to me. My mother's face paled like she'd seen a ghost. My father's jaw clenched. Kellen looked as if he was trying to melt into the wallpaper. I didn't speak at first. I pulled out my phone, opened the file folder marked Hotel Ownership, and handed it to Claudia. She glanced through, then looked up and nodded once. Her tone never wavered. "This hotel legally belongs to Mr. Arden Marston. It has for the past 7 years. There is no record of any transfer of ownership. The documents presented today are not valid." Gasps. One of Kellen's groomsmen stepped back like he'd just seen a wire snap. Someone from the bride's side whispered, "Wait, I thought they said he was unstable." Another voice murmured, "Then why are they forging ownership papers?" The words echoed around the marble floors. The story they'd spun about me being unstable, vindictive, toxic, was unraveling in real time, strand by strand. My father stepped forward, his voice suddenly small. "Why didn't you tell us everything was still under your name?" I looked at him steady. "I did. You didn't want to hear it." My mother jumped in, nervous laughter escaping her lips like it could patch a sinking ship. "Well, we thought you'd eventually sign the transfer. It was just a formality." Claudia cut in, tone clipped. "Ma'am, forgery is not a formality." The word hit like a thunderclap. Guests turned. Phones came out. The lie was no longer quiet. Kellen stepped toward me, eyes wide and glassy. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said. "I just wanted peace. I didn't want you to show up angry and ruin everything." I studied him, the brother I once helped through school, through breakups, through late rent payments. "I didn't plan to make a scene," I said quietly. "You didn't even give me a chance. You made decisions based on fear and lies, not on who I am." He didn't respond. He just nodded slowly, as if the realization had arrived too late. Then, my father again, reaching, grasping for some last rope to pull us back. "Son," he said, "can't we fix this, for the sake of the family?" I looked at them, all of them, people who erased my name from memories, who twisted my story to protect their version of themselves. I thought of every silent holiday, every unreturned call, every time I handed over help and got shame in return. "No," I said simply. "Family isn't built on what you take from someone. It's built on what you honor. You haven't honored me in years." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just spoke what they refused to face. "I'm done giving chances that cost me pieces of myself." The room stood still. There was no comeback for truth that clean. I turned to Claudia. "Please take care of their event. They don't need me. They never did." And then I walked away, past the whispers, past the stares, past Kellen calling my name, soft, hesitant. I didn't turn around. Not from hate, from self-preservation. That's the thing they never understood. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you're cruel. It means you finally stop believing you were unworthy of peace. Later that night, I sat out on the balcony of my suite. The city hummed below, but it felt far away. like background music to a life that had finally shifted into a key that fit my voice. I could hear faint wedding music from the ballroom, cheers, a microphone feedback squeal, laughter that didn't belong to me, and I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel victorious either. I felt free. Free from pretending I wasn't hurt. Free from chasing a chair at a table where the meal was long gone. Free from the weight of making others comfortable at my own expense. The wounds, they were still there. But now, so was my truth. And that truth, it belonged to me. I whispered into the night, not to the people below, not to the family who blurred the lines between blood and betrayal, but to the part of myself I'd finally reclaimed. They couldn't break me. Not this time.